Captain Jake Morrison stared at the massive shape on his ship's main screen. The object was huge, bigger than any ship humans had ever built. It drifted silent and dark in the cold space beyond Neptune, turning slowly like a giant metal whale. Floating in an endless ocean. How long has it been there? Jake asked his crew. Our deep space sensors picked it up 3 days ago, said Lisa Park, his chief engineer. She was a small woman with quick hands and an even quicker mind. It's been drifting toward the inner solar system for maybe 50 years. We just never saw it before because it was too far out. Jake walked closer to the screen. The alien ship was black as space itself, with strange curves and angles that hurt to look at for too long. It was 10 kilometers from front to back, longer than most cities on Earth. No human ship had ever been built even half that size. Any signs of life? Jake asked. Ryan Bell, the tactical officer, shook his head. No heat signatures, no radio signals, nothing, but there's something strange about the power readings. What kind of strange? Well, it should be completely dead, after drifting in space for so long. But our sensors are picking up a faint energy signature from the center of the ship, like something is still running inside. Dr. Amanda Cole looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life, though until today that had been mostly theoretical work. Captain, this could be the greatest discovery in human history. We've been looking for proof of alien life for centuries. This might be our first real evidence. Jake nodded but felt uneasy. Something about the ship bothered him, though he couldn't say what. It was too perfect, too convenient. After all these years of searching for aliens, here was their ship practically delivered to Earth's stop. Get me Admiral Sullivan, Jake ordered. A few minutes later, Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared on the communication screen. She was a tough woman who had commanded the Earth Defense Fleet for 15 years. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes were sharp as laser beams. Captain Morrison, I've been looking at the data you sent. This is incredible, she said. Yes, ma'am. But I'm not sure we should board it. Something feels wrong about this whole situation. Wrong how? Jake struggled to put his feelings into words. It's too convenient, Admiral. We've been searching for alien life for generations, and suddenly this ship just appears in our solar system? And it's not completely dead, but it's not trying to communicate either. It's like it's waiting for something. Admiral Sullivan was quiet for a moment. Captain, I understand your concerns. But this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Think about what we could learn from their technology. We could advance human civilization by hundreds of years. Or we could all die trying, Jake muttered. That's a risk we have to take. I'm ordering you to board that ship and investigate. But be careful. Take a small team, stay in constant contact, and at the first sign of danger, you get out of there. Jake sighed. He had known this was coming. Yes, ma'am. We'll board in 6 hours. After the Admiral signed off, Jake gathered his team. Besides Lisa, Ryan, and Dr. Cole, he would take 2 security officers, Pete Johnson and Maria Santos. 6 people total, enough to cover each other, but not so many that they couldn't move quickly if needed. They spent the next few hours preparing. Lisa checked all their equipment twice. Ryan made sure everyone's weapons were working perfectly. Dr. Cole studied the ship's exterior, looking for clues about the aliens who built it. The design is completely different from anything humans would build, she told them. See these curves? Here? And the way the metal seems to flow like water? This suggests the aliens who built it think very differently from us. Different how? Pete asked. He was a big man who had served in the military for 20 years before joining the space fleet. It's hard to say, but human designs are usually practical, efficient. This ship looks more like art than engineering. Either these aliens care more about beauty than function, or their idea of function is completely different from ours. Maria Santos, the other security officer, frowned at the screen. Or maybe it's designed to look harmless. Make us think it's safe to approach. Jake looked at her with interest. Maria was young but smart, and she had good instincts. What makes you think that? Well, look at it. It's big and impressive, but not threatening. No obvious weapons, no aggressive posture. If I wanted to lure someone into a trap, I might make my ship look exactly like this. The team finished their preparations and moved to the shuttle bay. Their small ship, the Endeavour, carried 2 shuttles for situations like this. The shuttle was equipped with cutting tools in case they needed to force their way into the alien ship. As they approached the massive vessel, Jake felt his uneasiness growing. The ship was even more impressive up close. Its hull was perfectly smooth, made of some black material that seemed to absorb light. There were no visible seams or joints, as if the entire ship had been carved from a single piece of metal. There, Lisa pointed to a section of the hull. That looks like it might be an airlock. The shuttle moved closer. As they got within 50 meters of the alien ship, something amazing happened. A section of the hull simply opened, revealing a docking bay that was exactly the right size for their shuttle. Well, that's not ominous at all, Ryan said dryly. Jake stared at the opening. How did it know we were coming? How did it know what size our shuttle is? Maybe it's automatic, Lisa suggested. Maybe it opens for any ship that approaches. Or maybe it's been watching us, Maria said quietly. Jake made his decision. We're going in. But everyone stays alert. If anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. The shuttle slid into the alien docking bay. As soon as they were inside, the opening sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Jake felt his heart rate increase. They were now inside the alien ship, cut off from the Endeavour. Atmosphere is breathable, Dr. Cole reported, checking her instruments. Same oxygen-nitrogen mix as Earth, perfect pressure and temperature. How convenient, Jake said. Almost like they're expecting human visitors. The team put on their helmets anyway and checked their weapons one more time. Then they opened the shuttle door and stepped into humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold a dozen shuttles their size. The walls were the same smooth black material as the hull, but here there were panels that glowed with a soft blue light. The air hummed with a low vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Which way? Ryan asked. There was only one exit from the docking bay, a corridor that curved away into darkness. Jake looked at his team. They all looked nervous but determined. Stay together, he said. And remember, we're just here to look around. Don't touch anything unless I say so. They walked into the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the alien silence. Behind them, the shuttle waited in the docking bay, their only way home. Ahead of them lay the unknown. None of them realized they had just walked into the most sophisticated trap ever built. The corridor stretched ahead of them like a throat waiting to swallow them whole. Jake led his team deeper into the alien ship, their flashlights cutting through the blue-tinted darkness. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when they weren't looking directly at them. Captain, look at this, Dr. Cole whispered, pointing to a section of wall. These symbols, they're not just decorative. I think they're some kind of writing system. Lisa Park knelt beside a panel that glowed brighter than the others. The technology here is incredible. These control systems are at least 1,000 years ahead of anything we have on Earth. Maybe more, Ryan added, keeping his weapon ready. But why is everything sized for humans? Look at these corridors, these control panels. They're all the right height for us. Jake had been thinking the same thing. Either these aliens are exactly our size, or they built this ship for us, Maria finished his thought. They continued walking. The corridor branched into 3 paths. Jake chose the middle one, which led to a vast chamber filled with strange machinery. The room was so large that their flashlights couldn't reach the far walls. In the center stood a massive pillar that pulsed with soft light. My God, Dr. Cole breathed. This must be the power source we detected. Pete Johnson walked toward the pillar, fascinated by the dancing lights inside it. I've never seen anything like this. It's beautiful. Pete, don't touch anything, Jake warned, but Pete was already reaching out his hand. The moment his fingers touched the pillar, everything changed. The room exploded with light. Alarms began screaming in sounds that hurt their ears. The floor beneath them started to vibrate, and they could hear the groaning of metal as massive. Machinery came to life throughout the ship. "What did you do?" Ryan shouted over the noise. "I barely touched it." Pete yelled back. Then the doors began to close. Heavy blast doors dropped from the ceiling, sealing off the entrances to the chamber. The team ran toward the nearest exit, but they were too late. The door slammed shut with a final echoing boom. They were trapped. "Everyone stay calm," Jake said, though his own heart was racing. "Lisa, can you get those doors open?" Lisa ran to the nearest control panel and began studying it. "The technology is completely foreign, but maybe I can figure out the basic principles." As she worked, the room continued to change around them. The walls began to glow brighter, and new panels appeared that hadn't been there before. The air itself seemed to thicken, making it harder to breathe. Then the voice came. It spoke in perfect English, coming from speakers they couldn't see. The voice was neither male nor female, but something in between, with an accent that sounded like no human language they had ever heard. "Welcome, humans of Earth," the voice said. "You have activated the testing protocol. Do not be afraid. You will not be harmed if you cooperate." "Who are you?" Jake demanded. "What do you want?" A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a tall, thin creature with pale gray skin and large black eyes. It wore robes that seemed to be made of starlight, and when it moved, its image flickered like a bad television signal. "I am the keeper of this vessel," the hologram said. "I represent the hegemony, the rightful rulers of this galaxy. This ship is a testing facility designed to evaluate new species that might pose a threat to galactic order." "Testing facility?" Dr. Cole stepped forward. "You mean this whole ship is a trap?" "Not a trap," the keeper replied. "A tool. For 3,000 years, this ship has drifted through space, waiting for intelligent species to discover it. Most pass our tests and are welcomed into the hegemony as servants. Others—" The hologram paused. "Others are eliminated." Jake felt cold anger building in his chest. "And what makes you think you have the right to test us?" "The right of the strong over the weak," the keeper said simply. "The right of the civilized over the primitive. You are a young species, barely capable of traveling between worlds. We have ruled the galaxy since before your son was born. How many species have you done this to?" Maria asked. 47 species have been tested by this ship alone," the keeper replied. 32 were found suitable for service. 15 were eliminated as threats to galactic peace. The hologram raised its hand, and the room began to change again. The floor split into sections, and each member of the team found themselves standing on separate platforms. The platforms began to move, carrying them to different parts of the chamber. "No!" Jake shouted, reaching for his team. "Keep us together." "The testing must be conducted individually," the keeper explained. "Each of you will face trials designed to measure your intelligence, your strength, your will to survive, and your capacity for obedience. Those who pass will be granted the honor of serving the hegemony. Those who fail will be eliminated." Jake's platform carried him toward a wall that opened to reveal a smaller chamber. He could see Lisa being taken to what looked like an engineering workshop. While Ryan was heading toward what appeared to be a combat arena, Dr. Cole was moving toward a room filled with alien specimens. And Pete and Maria were being carried to chambers he couldn't see clearly. "Wait," Jake called out. "What if we refuse to take your tests?" The keeper's image flickered, and for a moment Jake thought he saw something like surprise in its black eyes. "Refuse? No species has ever refused. To refuse is to choose elimination." "Then maybe it's time someone tried something new," Jake said. The keeper was quiet for a long moment. "You are interesting, but ultimately you have no choice. The testing chambers are sealed, the air supply is limited. You will take the tests or you will die." Jake's platform carried him into his chamber, and the door sealed behind him. He was alone in a room that seemed to be designed like a puzzle. There were symbols on the walls, movable blocks on the floor, and what looked like a control panel in the center. A new voice spoke, this one coming from inside his chamber. "Human, Jake Morrison, you will solve the puzzle before you. You have 1 hour. If you succeed, you will advance to the next test. If you fail, you will be eliminated. Jake looked around the room. The puzzle was complex, involving mathematics, pattern recognition, and three-dimensional thinking. It was designed to test intelligence, but more than that, it was designed to test obedience. The alien wanted to see if he would follow instructions without question, but Jake had spent his whole life refusing to follow instructions that didn't make sense. He had become a starship captain by thinking for himself, not by doing what others expected him to do. Instead of starting the puzzle, Jake began examining the room itself. He ran his hands along the walls, looking for weaknesses. He studied the door, searching for a way to override the lock. He ignored the puzzle completely. "Human Jake Morrison," the voice said after 10 minutes, "you have not begun the test. Do you require clarification of the instructions?" "I understand the instructions perfectly," Jake replied. "I just don't accept them." Meanwhile, in the other chambers, his team was having similar thoughts. Lisa was supposed to repair a broken alien device, but instead she was taking it apart to understand how it worked. Ryan was facing combat robots, but instead of fighting them, he was studying their movement patterns and looking for their control systems. Dr. Cole was supposed to identify alien biological samples, but she was more interested in the scanning equipment being used to study her. Pete and Maria were in psychological testing chambers, but they were spending their time trying to communicate with each other through the walls. None of them were doing what the aliens expected. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the Keeper found itself dealing with a species that refused to play by the rules. In his chamber, Jake smiled grimly as he worked on the door lock. "Let's see how your perfect system handles a little human stubbornness." The trap had been sprung, but the prey wasn't behaving as expected, and that was about to become the alien's biggest problem. Lisa Park had always been good at fixing things. When she was 8 years old, she had taken apart her family's television to see how it worked. When she was 16, she had built her own computer from spare parts. Now, at 32, she was the chief engineer of a starship, and the aliens expected her to fix their broken device. They were about to learn that Lisa had her own ideas about how things should work. The device on the table looked like a metal flower with dozens of glowing petals. Half of the petals were dark, and the alien voice had told her to restore them to full brightness. The instructions were clear. Follow the repair manual displayed on the wall. Use only the tools provided, and complete the task within 2 hours. Lisa ignored the instructions completely. Instead, she began taking the device apart. The aliens had given her tools for repair, but Lisa used them for exploration. She carefully removed each component, studying how they connected to each other. The technology was beautiful and complex, but it followed rules that Lisa could understand. "Interesting," she said to herself. "They use crystalline matrices for data storage, but the power flow is all wrong. No wonder half the petals are dark." The alien voice spoke again. "Human Lisa Park, you are not following the repair protocol. Please begin the proper procedure." "I'm following a procedure," Lisa replied, "just not yours." She continued her work, mapping out the device's internal structure. As she worked, she began to understand something important. The alien technology wasn't just advanced, it was predictable. It followed patterns that never changed, rules that never bent. It was like a language that used the same words over and over again. Human technology was different. Humans built things that could adapt, change, and grow. They created systems that could handle the unexpected. But these aliens seemed to build everything the same way, using the same principles and the same solutions. "You're not used to people who think differently, are you?" Lisa said to the voice. She found what she was looking for in the device's core. The power distribution system was designed to fail if anyone tried to repair it incorrectly. But Lisa wasn't trying to repair it, she was trying to understand it. And once she understood it, she could make it do things its creators never intended. Instead of restoring the dark petals, Lisa began modifying the device. She rerouted power flows, changed the crystalline matrix patterns, and introduced feedback loops that would make the system unstable. To anyone watching, it looked like she was breaking the device even more, but Lisa knew what she was doing. She was teaching the alien technology to think like a human dot in the combat chamber. Ryan Bell was having his own educational experience. The aliens had sent 3 robot fighters to test his combat skills. They moved with perfect coordination. Their attacks precisely timed and mathematically perfect. Ryan had spent 15 years in the military before joining the space fleet. He had fought in wars on 3 different planets, and he had learned one important lesson: perfect tactics only. Work against perfect opponents? Humans were not perfect. The robots expected him to fight back with standard combat techniques. They were programmed to counter every known fighting style, every weapon, every strategy that had been used by the other 47 species they had tested, but Ryan didn't fight them. Instead, he ran. He ran in circles around the chamber, making random turns and sudden stops. He threw his weapons at the walls instead of at the robots. He shouted nonsense words at the top of his lungs. He did everything wrong according to military training, and it worked. The robots couldn't predict his movements because his movements made no sense. They couldn't counter his attacks because he wasn't attacking. They couldn't adapt to his strategy because he didn't have one. After 10 minutes of chaos, the robots simply stopped moving. They stood in the center of the chamber, their processors overloaded by trying to understand behavior that had no pattern. "Human Ryan Bell," the alien voice said, "your combat performance is highly irregular. Please explain your tactics." "That's the point," Ryan said, grinning. "You can't explain chaos. You can't predict it, you can't control it, and you can't beat it." He walked over to one of the frozen robots and began examining its construction. Like Lisa, he was learning about alien technology. But Ryan was learning about its weaknesses. In the biological testing chamber, Dr. Amanda Cole was making discoveries of her own. The aliens had given her a collection of specimens from different worlds and asked her to identify their biological functions. It was supposed to test her scientific knowledge and her ability to follow proper research procedures, but Amanda was more interested in the scanning equipment the aliens were using to study her. Every time she moved, every time she spoke, every time she even thought too hard about something, the alien scanners recorded it. They were building a complete profile of human biology and psychology. But the scanners were designed to study predictable, logical species. Humans were neither predictable nor logical. Amanda began acting in ways that would confuse the scanners. She would start to examine one specimen, then suddenly switch to another. She would speak her thoughts out loud, then suddenly stop in the middle of a sentence. She would show interest in things that weren't important and ignore things that were. The scanners tried to record everything, but Amanda was giving them too much information. She was creating noise in their data, making it impossible for them to build an accurate profile of human behavior. "You're trying to understand us," she said to the chamber, "but you're going about it all wrong. You think intelligence means following rules. You think logic means being predictable. But human intelligence is about breaking rules when they don't work." While she talked, Amanda was also studying the alien specimens. She was learning about the biology of other species, the ones that had been tested before humans. And she was beginning to understand something important about the aliens themselves. They were afraid. All this testing, all this evaluation, all this careful study of other species, it wasn't about maintaining order. It was about maintaining control. The aliens had built a system to deal with threats, but they had never encountered a species that didn't fit their system. In the psychological testing chambers, Pete Johnson and Maria Santos were dealing with their own challenges. Pete was facing illusions designed to break his will, while Maria was being subjected to fear-inducing scenarios meant to test her courage, but both of them had grown up human, and humans had been dealing with fear and uncertainty for thousands of years. They had learned to adapt, to survive, to find hope in hopeless situations. Pete responded to the illusions by laughing at them. Maria responded to the fear scenarios by making jokes. Neither reaction was what the aliens expected. The testing chambers were designed to isolate the subjects to make them feel alone and helpless. But Pete and Maria had found a way to communicate. They tapped messages on the walls, used reflected light to send signals, and even created a simple code using the timing of their movements. The aliens had never encountered a species that refused to be isolated. In his chamber, Jake Morrison was making the most important discovery of all. While his team was learning about alien technology and psychology, Jake was learning about the ship itself. He had spent hours studying the door lock, the wall panels, and the environmental controls. The ship was incredibly advanced, but it was also incredibly old. It had been running the same programs, following the same procedures for thousands of years. It was like a machine that had been built to do one job and had never been asked to do anything else. Jake had found access panels hidden behind the wall decorations. He had traced power conduits and data cables. He had mapped the ship's communication systems and security protocols. And he had discovered something amazing. The ship wasn't just a testing facility. It was a communications hub. Every test result, every piece of data about the species they encountered was transmitted back to the hegemony homeworlds. The aliens had been using this ship to build a database of every intelligent species in the galaxy, but the ship's communication systems were designed to handle normal, predictable data. They weren't designed to handle the kind of chaotic, unpredictable information that humans were creating. Jake smiled as he worked on the wall panel. His team was doing exactly what humans did best. They were refusing to follow the rules. And in doing so, they were breaking a system that had worked perfectly for 3,000 years. The aliens had built the perfect trap for logical, predictable species. But they had never encountered a species that treated logic as a suggestion rather than a law. The trap was about to become the trapped. The first sign that something was wrong came when Lisa's modified device began to glow brighter than it ever had before. The alien voice in her chamber had gone silent 20 minutes ago, and now the walls themselves were starting to flicker. With unstable light patterns. Lisa grinned as she watched her handiwork. The device wasn't just working, it was working better than the aliens had ever intended. She had turned their simple repair test into a lesson in human engineering. The power flows she had created were spreading through the ship's systems, carrying her modifications with them. "You built everything to work the same way," she said to the silent chamber. "But humans don't think the same way. And now your ship is learning to think like us." The modified device was acting like a virus in the ship's network. Every system it touched became a little more chaotic, a little more unpredictable. The aliens had built their technology to be perfect and unchanging, but Lisa was teaching it to adapt and evolve. She pressed her ear to the wall and heard something that made her smile. The sound of machinery struggling, of systems trying to process information they weren't designed to handle. The ship was starting to malfunction, but not in the way the aliens expected. In the combat chamber, Ryan had made his own discovery. The 3 robots that had been sent to test him were now following him around like confused puppies. His chaotic behavior had broken their programming so completely that they no longer knew what they were supposed to do, but Ryan had learned something more important. He had found the control room that operated the robots. The door to the control room had been hidden behind a wall panel, but Ryan's random running around the chamber had accidentally triggered the opening mechanism. Inside, he found banks of computers and control systems that managed not just the combat tests, but security throughout the entire ship. "Let's see how you like a taste of human tactics," Ryan said as he began working on the control systems. He didn't try to understand the alien technology the way Lisa had. Instead, he applied military thinking to the problem. He identified the ship's weak points, its communication lines, its power distribution. Then he began to sabotage them. Ryan introduced random delays into the security systems. He reversed the logic on door controls. He made the ship's defensive systems respond to signals that didn't exist and ignore signals that did. Within minutes, the ship's security network was in chaos. The aliens had built their systems to handle external threats, But they had never considered what would happen if someone started attacking the system from the inside with completely illogical methods. In her chamber, Dr. Amanda Cole was making the most important discovery of all. The alien specimens she was supposed to study had been collected from 47 different worlds. Each one represented a species that had been tested by this ship, but Amanda wasn't just studying the specimens. She was studying the data files that came with them. And what she found made her angry. The aliens hadn't just tested these species, they had conquered them. Every species that had failed the tests had been eliminated. Every species that had passed had been enslaved. The hegemony wasn't maintaining galactic order, they were maintaining galactic tyranny. 32 species enslaved? Amanda said as she read through the files. 15 species completely destroyed. And all of it justified by your tests. But Amanda had also found something else in the data files. Information about the hegemony itself. Their military strength, their technology, their homeworlds. The aliens had been so confident in their testing system that they had stored all their secrets in the ship's database. They had never considered that a tested species might gain access to that information. Amanda began copying everything she could find. But she also began to understand the aliens' weakness. They had grown complacent over thousands of years. They expected every species to react the same way, to follow the same patterns. They had built their entire civilization around the idea that intelligence was predictable. Humans were about to prove them wrong. Meanwhile, Pete Johnson and Maria Santos had managed to do something the aliens thought was impossible. They had escaped from their chambers. The psychological tests had been designed to break their will, to make them give up and accept defeat. But Pete and Maria had spent their entire lives as humans, and humans never gave up. They had turned the aliens' own illusions against them, using the projected fears and challenges as tools to find weaknesses in their prison. Pete had discovered that the fear-inducing scenarios were created by manipulating the chamber's environmental controls. By refusing to be afraid, by laughing at the illusions, he had caused the system to overload itself trying to create something that would scare him. Maria had done something similar with her courage tests. She had faced every challenge with humor and determination, confusing the systems that were designed to measure fear and submission. When the chamber's control systems failed, the doors had opened automatically. The aliens had built safety systems to prevent subjects from dying accidentally. But they had never considered that those same safety systems could be used to escape. Now, Pete and Maria were free inside the ship, and they were looking for their teammates. In his chamber, Jake Morrison was putting all the pieces together. His study of the ship's systems had revealed something incredible. The ship wasn't just a testing facility. It was the key to the entire hegemony communication network. Every ship, every world, every military installation in the alien empire was connected through this vessel. The aliens had made it the central hub of their information network because they thought it was the safest place in the galaxy. After all, what tested species could possibly gain control of it? Jake had found the main communication array and was working on accessing it. The aliens had encrypted their systems, but their encryption was based on logical, predictable patterns. Jake was learning to think like the aliens thought, to understand their rigid way of processing information, but he was also learning to break their rules. "You made one mistake," Jake said as he worked on the communication systems. "You assumed that every species would think like you do, but humans don't think like anyone else." He began to input commands that the system wasn't designed to handle. Random data, contradictory instructions, chaos disguised as information. The communication array tried to process it all, but it couldn't handle the human approach to problem-solving. As the system struggled, Jake gained more and more access to the ship's networks. He could see the status of every system, every test chamber, every security protocol. And he could see that his team was winning. Lisa's modifications were spreading through the ship like wildfire. Ryan's sabotage was causing security failures throughout the vessel. Amanda's data copying was overwhelming the storage systems. Pete and Maria's escape was triggering emergency protocols that conflicted with the testing. Procedures, the ship was breaking down, but not because of mechanical failure. It was breaking down because it was trying to process human behavior with systems designed for logical, predictable species. Jake opened a communication channel to his team. It took him several tries because the ship's systems kept trying to block unauthorized communications, but eventually he managed to connect to all of them. "Everyone, this is Jake. Can you hear me?" "Jake," Lisa's voice came through clearly. "I've been trying to reach you for an hour. The ship's systems are going crazy." That's because we're driving them crazy," Jake replied. "This whole ship is designed to handle species that think logically, but humans don't think logically. We think creatively." "I'm in the security control room," Ryan reported. "The ship's defenses are completely confused. I've got robots trying to guard against threats that don't exist and ignoring the ones that do. And I've got access to their database," Amanda added. "Jake, this ship has information on every species in the galaxy, military data, technology specifications, everything." "Pete and Maria, where are you?" Jake asked. "We're in some kind of corridor," Pete replied. "There are symbols on the walls." "That keep changing?" "I think the ship is trying to reroute us back to the testing chambers." "Don't let it," Jake said. "The ship's navigation systems are probably as confused as everything else. Just keep moving toward the center of the ship." Jake looked at the communication array he had been working on. The system was still trying to process his chaotic inputs, but it was losing the battle. He could see error messages cascading through. The ship's network systems failing one by one as they tried to handle human unpredictability. "Everyone, I think we can take control of this ship," Jake said. "The aliens build it to be perfect, but perfection is brittle. It breaks when you push it in ways it wasn't designed to handle. What do you want us to do?" Lisa asked. Jake smiled grimly. "What we do best. Be human, be unpredictable, be creative. And let's show these aliens what happens when they try to trap a species that refuses to be trapped." The ship shuddered around them as more systems failed. The aliens had built the perfect prison for logical species, but they had never considered what would happen if they tried to imprison a species that treated logic as a starting point rather than a destination. The trap was becoming the trapped, and the hunters were about to become the hunted. The Keeper's hologram flickered badly as it appeared in the central chamber where the human team had finally gathered. Jake could see panic in the alien's large black eyes, though it was trying to hide it behind cold authority. "This is unacceptable," the Keeper said, its voice filled with static from the failing communication systems. "You have corrupted our testing protocols. You have damaged sacred technology that has functioned perfectly for 3,000 years. "Your technology wasn't perfect," Lisa replied, still working on a control panel she had torn from the wall. "It was just untested. You never ran it against a species that thinks outside your rules." Jake stepped forward. His team was united again, and for the first time since boarding the alien ship, he felt like they were in control. "We need to talk about what happens next." "There is nothing to discuss," the Keeper said. "You will be eliminated for your crimes against the hegemony. Even now, our warships are being summoned to destroy this vessel and everything on it." "That's going to be a problem," Ryan said with a grin. He was holding a datapad that showed the ship's defensive systems. "Because we control your weapons now, and your communications, and pretty much everything else." The Keeper's image flickered more violently. "Impossible. The control systems require authorization codes that no tested species could know." "You're right," Amanda said, looking up from the alien database she had been studying. "No tested species could know them, but we're not just any tested species. We're humans." She activated a wall display that showed the results of all the testing that had happened on the ship. 47 species had been tested over the centuries. 47 different approaches to the aliens' challenges, and all of them had been predictable. "Look at this data," Amanda continued. "Every species that passed your tests did so by following your rules. Every species that failed did so by breaking your rules incorrectly. But we're the first species to break your rules correctly." "There is no such thing as breaking rules correctly," the keeper protested. That's your problem, Jake said. You think rules are absolute, but humans see rules as tools. We follow them when they work, and we change them when they don't. Pete and Maria had been exploring the ship while the others worked on the control systems. Now they returned with news that made everyone stop and listen. Captain, Pete said, you need to see what we found in the lower levels of the ship. What is it? Other ships, Maria replied, dozens of them. All different designs, all from different species. I think they're the ships of everyone who failed the tests. The keeper's hologram turned to face them. Those vessels are trophies of our victories, reminders of the fate that awaits those who oppose the hegemony. Or, Jake said slowly, they're resources we can use. He turned to Lisa. Can you get those ships operational? Lisa's eyes lit up with excitement. If they're anything like this ship, probably. The aliens use the same technology principles for everything. Once you understand the pattern, you can apply it anywhere. No, the keeper said, its voice rising. You cannot. Those ships belong to the hegemony. You are prisoners here? You have no authority to... Actually, Ryan interrupted, we have all the authority we need. He activated his datapad, and the chamber's lights dimmed as the ship's main power systems responded to his commands. We control this ship now, which means we make the rules. The keeper's hologram began to fade as power was redirected away from the projection systems. This is temporary. The hegemony will send fleets to reclaim this vessel. You cannot hope to fight an empire that spans the galaxy. We're not planning to fight your empire, Jake said. We're planning to free it. Amanda stepped forward with her own data display. I've been studying your database. Do you want to know what I found? Information about every species you've conquered. Their homeworlds, their populations, their resources, but also something else, evidence that many of them are still fighting you. Resistance movements, she continued. Underground rebellions. Entire worlds that have never fully accepted hegemony rule. They're scattered across the galaxy, isolated from each other, unable to coordinate their efforts, but that's about to change. The keeper's image was barely visible now. You understand nothing. The hegemony maintains order. Without us, the galaxy would descend into chaos. Maybe, Jake said. But that should be their choice to make, not yours. Lisa looked up from her work. Jake, I've got control of the ships. Manufacturing systems. The aliens have been using this vessel to build new testing equipment for 3,000 years. But the same systems can build other things. Weapons, communication devices, ship modifications. And I've mapped the ships. Entire database, Amanda added. Not just information about conquered species, but also about hegemony technology. Military deployments, strategic weaknesses, everything a rebellion would need to succeed. Ryan activated another display. The ship's communication array can reach every corner of the galaxy. We can contact all those resistance movements, coordinate their efforts, share intelligence and resources. Pete pointed toward the lower levels of the ship. And we've got dozens of ships down there that we can modify and crew with people who want to fight for their freedom. Jake looked around at his team. Each of them had contributed something essential to their victory. Lisa's engineering brilliance, Ryan's tactical thinking, Amanda's scientific analysis, Pete and Maria's determination and courage. Together they had done something the aliens thought was impossible. So here's what we're going to do, Jake said. We're going to turn this ship into exactly what the hegemony fears most, a center of coordinated resistance. We're going to contact every species that wants to be free and give them the tools to fight back. The Keeper's hologram was now just a faint outline. You will fail. The hegemony has ruled for millennia. You are one small species from one small world. You're right, Jake admitted. We are small. But we're not alone. And we're about to prove that even the biggest empire can fall if enough small people decide to push back. He turned to Amanda. Send a message to Admiral Sullivan. Tell her what we've found and what we're planning. Then start contacting the resistance movements. What should I tell them? Amanda asked. Tell them that the age of the hegemony is ending, Jake replied. Tell them that humanity has arrived in the galaxy and we don't believe in impossible. Lisa had finished her work on the control systems. Jake, I've got full access to the ship's manufacturing capabilities. What do you want me to build first? Jake thought for a moment. The ship was full of alien technology that could advance human civilization by centuries. But more importantly, it was full of information that could free dozens of enslaved species. Build communication devices, he said, as many as you can. We're going to need to talk to a lot of people. Ryan was studying the tactical displays. The nearest hegemony fleet is 6 hours away. They're probably coming to investigate why this ship stopped responding to their signals. Let them come, Jake said. By the time they arrive, this won't be a hegemony ship anymore. It'll be the first vessel in the Free Galaxy fleet. The Keeper's hologram finally faded completely, its last words lost in static. The alien testing facility, which had operated unchanged for 3,000 years, was now under human control, but Jake knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony ruled hundreds of worlds and commanded millions of ships. The fight for galactic freedom would be long and difficult. Fortunately, humans had never been afraid of long, difficult fights. Everyone ready to start a revolution? Jake asked his team. The answer was unanimous. They were ready, the trap had become a weapon, and the galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity decided that the status quo needed to change. 6 months after taking control of the alien testing ship, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of what was now called the Liberation. Around him, beings from 12 different species worked together, at control stations that had been modified to accommodate their various physiologies. The ship that had once been a prison for countless civilizations had become the heart of the largest rebellion the galaxy had ever seen. "Captain, we're receiving reports from the vegan system," said Zara, a blue-skinned female from the planet. Kepler, who served as communications officer. "The resistance there has successfully captured 3 hegemony supply depots using the weapons we sent them." Jake nodded. "Any casualties?" "Minimal. They used the distraction tactics you taught them. The hegemony forces didn't know how to respond to coordinated chaos." Lisa Park looked up from her engineering station, where she was monitoring the ship's manufacturing systems. "The new batch of communication devices is ready for delivery. That's 500 more units we can distribute to resistance cells across the galaxy." The past 6 months had been busy ones. After taking control of the ship, Jake's team had worked around the clock to turn it into a coordination center for Galactic Rebellion. They had contacted every resistance movement mentioned in the hegemony database, offering them technology, intelligence, and most importantly, hope. The response had been overwhelming. Species that had been fighting isolated battles for decades suddenly found themselves part of a coordinated effort. The hegemony, which had maintained control through divide-and-conquer tactics, found itself facing unified opposition on hundreds of fronts. "Status report on the fleet?" Jake asked Ryan, who now served as tactical coordinator for the rebellion. 67 ships operational and ready for combat," Ryan replied. "Lisa's modifications to the captured alien vessels have made them faster and more maneuverable than anything the hegemony has. Plus, we've got crews that think like humans now, unpredictable and adaptive." The fleet Ryan mentioned consisted of ships that had been stored in the lower levels of the testing facility, vessels taken from species that had failed the hegemony's tests. Lisa had spent months studying their designs and modifying them with human engineering principles. The result was a collection of ships that could outthink and outmaneuver the rigid hegemony fleet. "Captain," Amanda Cole called out from her science station, "I'm detecting a large hegemony formation approaching the Centauri sector. Looks like they're moving to suppress the uprising there." "How large?" Jake asked. 200 ships, including 3 command vessels." Jake smiled grimly. "Perfect. Ryan, signal the Centauri resistance. Tell them to begin Operation Chaos in 3 hours." "Yes, sir." Operation Chaos was one of many tactics the humans had developed during their months of rebellion. Instead of meeting the hegemony in direct battle, the resistance forces would create confusion and disorder, forcing the aliens to respond to threats that didn't exist while missing the real attacks happening elsewhere. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years using predictable strategies and overwhelming force. But they had never faced an enemy that refused to fight fair, that treated warfare as an art rather than a science. "Captain," Pete Johnson called out from the sensor station, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth." "Put Admiral Sullivan?" Through. Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired but determined. Behind her, Jake could see the bustling activity of Earth's military command center. "Jake, I wanted to update you on the situation here. The hegemony sent a fleet to Earth last month, demanding our surrender and your return for trial. What did you tell them?" "I told them that humanity doesn't negotiate with tyrants," Sullivan replied with a slight smile. "That our new orbital defense platforms, built using the technology you sent us, convinced them to leave, permanently." Jake felt a surge of pride. The weapons and defensive technologies that Lisa had reverse-engineered from the alien ship had transformed Earth from a vulnerable backwater world into a fortress that even the hegemony couldn't crack. "Any word from the other resistance movements?" Sullivan asked. "Better than word," Jake replied. "We've got results. The hegemony has lost control of 17 star systems in the past month alone. Their empire is collapsing faster than they can respond to it." "And their response?" Amanda spoke up. "They're trying to fall back to their core worlds and establish a defensive perimeter. But they're using the same rigid tactics they've always used. They haven't learned to adapt." "Meanwhile," Ryan added, "every day we get stronger. More species joining the rebellion, more ships in our fleet, more worlds declaring their independence." The rebellion had grown beyond anything Jake had imagined when they first took control of the testing ship. What had started as 6 humans refusing to accept an alien test had become a galaxy-wide movement for freedom. The hegemony's own database had provided the information needed to contact and coordinate resistance movements across hundreds of worlds. "Captain," Maria Santos called out from her position at the tactical display, "I'm tracking multiple hegemony fleets pulling back from their outer territories. They're abandoning their forward positions." "Good," Jake said. "The more they retreat, the more worlds we liberate." The truth was, the hegemony was facing a problem they had never encountered before. For thousands of years, they had maintained control by being stronger, more advanced, and more organized than any single species they conquered. But now they were facing an alliance of dozens of species, all working together using tactics the aliens couldn't predict or counter. "Sir," Zara announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony High Command. They're requesting a meeting to discuss terms." Jake looked around at his diverse crew. Humans working alongside aliens who had once been slaves, all united in their determination to be free. The testing ship that had been designed to catalog and control other species had become the symbol of their liberation. "Tell them we'll meet," Jake said. "But make it clear that we're not negotiating surrender, we're accepting theirs." Over the next few hours, messages poured in from across the galaxy. The Draconian Empire had declared independence from the hegemony. The Crystal Worlds were forming their own defense alliance. The insect species of the Hive clusters were refusing to provide workers for hegemony projects. The empire that had seemed eternal was crumbling, and it was all because 6 humans had refused to accept that they were trapped. "You know what the best part is?" Lisa said during a brief break in the chaos of coordination. "What's that?" Jake asked. "They did this to themselves. If they had just left us alone, if they had never set that trap, none of this would have happened. They created their own downfall the moment they decided to test us." Jake nodded. "They thought they were so smart, building a perfect system to evaluate and control other species, but they forgot one thing." "What's that?" "Perfect systems are brittle. They break when you push them in ways they weren't designed to handle. And humans have been pushing boundaries since we first learned to walk." Amanda joined them at the observation window, where they could see the stars of a galaxy that was finally becoming free. "I've been thinking about what the Keeper said, back when we first took control of the ship, about how the hegemony maintained Order. What about it? They were right in a way. A galaxy is descending into chaos. Species are making their own choices, forming their own alliances, deciding their own futures. It's messy and unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. But it's free, Jake said. Exactly. And that's worth any amount of chaos. The testing ship that had once been the hegemony's greatest tool for maintaining control had become the galaxy's greatest weapon for achieving freedom. The trap that was supposed to eliminate threats to the Empire had instead given those threats the tools they needed to bring the Empire down. Jake looked out at the stars and thought about the future. There would still be battles to fight, governments to build, peace to negotiate. The galaxy was a big place and freedom was messy and complicated, but that was a human problem now. And humans were good at solving problems that seemed impossible. The aliens had set their trap perfectly, but they had never considered what would happen if the prey refused to stay trapped. They had built a tomb for their enemies, but instead, they had built a tomb for themselves. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of freedom had begun, and it had all started with 6 humans who refused to accept that any problem was unsolvable.